Okay? Somebody. See over here. Okay. Hey, thank you all for coming. And thank Nate and the recorder. I'm part of the Adams County Republican Committee. And thank you, gentlemen, for being here, coming, traveling. Some of you came quite a ways. Jim, Larry. Yep. Okay, so this is kind of exciting to me. I've never done a moderating job before, so you guys can break me in tonight, all right? But try to take it easy on that. Hey, this is, I feel like, this is kind of a good sign. The room is full. We really needed a bigger room, but it didn't work out. So here we are. There's 2 more seats, I guess, in the bathroom. So why don't we begin with the pledge, and let's stand together. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now I would like to open your heart. So if you bow your heads with me. Heavenly Father, we just bow before you and ask for your wisdom, for your guidance, for your grace on this event. Pray that you would give us just a good attitude, good hearts, and that we might recognize that we're all here because we care about, we love this country, we want to see it improve, we want to see it strengthen, and we need you most of all. Please give us grace. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So at this point, we have 1 microphone. What we are going to do tonight is it's going to be question and answer. That's our primary focus. So this is an opportunity to ask questions of the candidates. Okay, so we are going to do that, and I'm not going to, at this point, give direction beyond that, other than I would like that when you have a question, you raise your hand and I will try to monitor and call on you in some kind of order so that we're not interrupting each other, so that we're going one at a time. We will, on many of the questions, I think we will want to hear from multiple candidates. So there may be one question that applies to all of them, in which case we'll give all of them an opportunity. There may be questions that are specific. Sheriff, for instance. Hey, Sheriff Zollman, what about this? Or I'd like to know about that. So then we'll give opportunity to the sheriff candidates. Vice and alternately, there may be some questions that are specifically for the representatives, and then we'll take those accordingly. So that's kind of my plan. As you can tell, because we only have 1 mic, I'm going to ask the gentleman, when you are speaking, to stand up and do your best to project. Okay? If we're failing at that, then I'll just bring them over here to the mic one at a time and we'll go from there. Does that sound okay? All right. So I'm going to right now give each candidate just a brief opportunity. Introduce yourself, what you're running for, and anything else you want to comment. This is not really a time where we're looking for big speeches, because we kind of want to give the time to everybody's here to ask questions. So brief introduction. This is who I am. This is what I'm running for. This is why, that kind of thing. We're going to hear from Vicki then. Even though she's not competing, she's here as county commissioner and running again. So Vicki will make a few comments. So, Jim, if you wouldn't mind leading off, stand up and just deliver. Thank you.
How you guys doing? I'm Jim Chmelik. I'm up from Idaho County up by Cottonwood. I've actually campaigned down here before when I ran for lieutenant governor in 2014. I've been at this for over 22 years in the state of Idaho. I've been a county commissioner. I've been elected before. This is actually the 6th political race I've been. I've got quite a bit of experience down in the legislature. Probably the biggest asset I bring is my experience in natural resources. I don't know if any of you attended some of the meetings we did down here when I was talking about public lands. Transferring of public lands, those are huge issues for our small rural communities like this. We get gypped out on the education end because our funding doesn't keep up with what the rural areas have, because we used to have plenty of timber dollars, and we're seeing those evaporate before us. And I fought that battle for a long time. I fought the issues on the dams for a long time. I've been an Idaho County Farm Bureau member for 22 years, and I've worked down at the House of Delegates for 20 of those 22 years, shaping the actual policy that we take and we lobby the legislature with. So I bring a lot of experience to the table. I've got a wonderful wife I've been married to for 36 years. We have 8 children. We have 13 grandchildren, one on the way. Probably one of the biggest reasons I've gotten back into politics, because I've been out for 8 years. If somebody would have told me, when I got out that I'd be back doing this, I would have laughed. I just threw away over 800 signs 2 years ago. Didn't think I'd ever need them again. So I'd like to bring that experience to the table and work for you guys. This is a big district, covers a lot of territory, but I've got a lot of experience I'd like to bring to the table for you guys down here, for Idaho County, and for up in Nez Perce County. I've been doing it, like I said, for quite a while. I'd like to hopefully bring that out to you guys. I am supported by all 3 of the county farm bureaus in each of the counties. I've got the endorsement of Russ Fulcher. Vicki Purdy is actually a big supporter of mine, and I think there's a clear reason why that. I've always been able to reach across the aisle and work with people inside of our party and build relationships. And I'd like to build some relationships hopefully here tonight. So I'd appreciate your vote on May 21st. I'm running for District 7A, and my name is Jim Chmelik. Thank you.
My name's Charlie Shepard. I was born and raised in Idaho. I went to high school, majority of my high school, Garden Valley. We were a big rival of council all through my high school. Ended up graduating at Salmon River, and again made a rivalry out of that. Worked most of my adult life in the natural resource industry, either working in the woods or building log homes, running the sawmill. Married with 4 kids, have 4 grandkids now, and I've been your representative for 4 years, and if you guys see fit, I'll do 2 more. So thanks for having me.
Good evening, my name is Kenn. I'm a candidate for sheriff. I've lived in Idaho now for 5 years with my wife of 37 years. I've got 2 grown sons and 11 grandkids, not quite as many, and 2 dogs. That's important to mention. I retired after 33 plus years of law enforcement experience with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department as a sergeant, where I worked for 19 years. Prior to that, I worked for 13 years for the Compton Police Department before they disbanded their police department and contracted over the Sheriff's Department. I've got vast real-world experiences. I worked in some of the toughest, busiest places on the planet. Got a lot of experience as a supervisor, working the administrative side of law enforcement, the training side of law enforcement, the tactical side of law enforcement, the investigative side of law enforcement. I'm pretty well-rounded. I was fortunate enough and blessed enough to be able to work a lot of different things in my 33 plus years as a career. I don't need a new job. I didn't retire to work ever again, but I wanted to present myself to be an alternative to what's already going on as far as law enforcement goes in this county. I love this county. I love the people in this county. There's no place I'd rather be. I built a house here on property that I bought before I retired, knowing this is where we were going to come to, and this is going to be where I'm going to be buried as well. So with that, that's my primary motivation, is to come in and offer to the people of Adams County my experiences, my training, my expertise, to come in and try and bring the sheriff's department a little bit further up than it is already now, as far as professionally, training wise, any other ways that I can help out and work out. So thank you all for showing up today. This is a pretty big crowd, and this is very impressive. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Larry Dunn, and I am delighted to be here to see what a great turnout this is. This is awesome. My wife Tina and I live 6 miles west of Whitebird on the western slope of the lower Salmon River in Idaho County. I am a God-fearing veteran of the United States Marine Corps and the U.S. Navy. I've also been a critical care nurse, a histologist, which is a pathology laboratory technician, but my primary career was also in law enforcement. I retired after 22 years honorably. The reason I'm running is because what's going on in Idaho, which reflects much of what's going on in this country, is that I believe, not to be dramatic, we are under attack from a lot of influences outside of this state which want to change Idaho to something that we're not. And that is, the Republicans call it red. Conservative, God-fearing people who love their country, who love their families, and who take care of their neighbors. The fact of the matter is, Boise is a super complicated environment. If you were kind enough to visit my website at some point, I'd appreciate that. DunnForIdaho.com. Hopefully that's easy to remember. You'll see that I have a fairly extensive background in some pretty complicated and what I will say detailed careers. For example, my wife Tina and I started 2 Safe Families for Children ministries, which were entirely church-supported ministries to help keep kids out of the foster care system. I think Idaho's government is too big, too bloated. 40% of our budget in Idaho is federal money. All of that money comes with strings attached. Not only is that an end run around the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, it's a threat to our sovereignty, because if all that money, 40%, comes from the feds, who's in charge of what we're doing as a state? That's a problem. So let me wrap this up by saying I'd be delighted to talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere. What I'm interested in is being your representative. We need a change of horses. We need some fresh blood in Boise. If you want a representative that's actually going to return your phone calls, your emails, who will show up, who will be around, other than when it's time to get reelected, then I'm your man. Name's Larry Dunn, and I'd like your vote. Seat 7B. Thank you.
Well, I look out here, I don't see very many faces I don't know. I'm Ryan Zollman. I'm your Adams County Sheriff. I've been your sheriff for the last 12 years. Spent 22 years with Adams County Sheriff's Office. You guys, if you read the paper, you'll see, as a young kid growing up, I didn't grow up in Idaho. I grew up just across the river. I'd sit on my grandpa's front porch and I'd look across the river and I'd tell my grandpa, I'm going to hunt elk in those mountains someday. It took me a while to get here, but I'm here. I drove through Council, Idaho when my sister moved up here to meet my wife on a blind date. Blind dates do work. She was a beautiful lady and I never turned back. I just love working here. I clearly am the young man of this group. Thank goodness I don't have any grandkids. My daughters are 18 and 20 years old. So I'm really grateful for that. Someday maybe, but not right now. So this is my home. This is my community. I've been through the highest of highs in this job and in my life. I've been through the lowest of lows. I've suffered things that nobody ever wants to suffer. And when that happened, this community, these people, my family, surrounded me and wrapped me and took care of me. And I am committed and I am dedicated for the rest of my career to do the same thing for you guys. This isn't a job for me. This is my career. This is my life. This is my livelihood. This is my home. And you guys have stood by me, and I'm going to stand by you through whatever it comes. So thank you. I appreciate your support in the past, and I look forward to your support in the future.
What a great crowd. Thank you guys all for coming out. This is just awesome. Not very often do you get people to come out for political stuff. So I guess there's a lot going on that people need to speak up about. So this is fantastic. So I'm Vicki Purdy. I'm your commissioner, Adams County Commissioner. This is my 3rd term. They're offset, so I had a 4-year and a 2-year, and this will be a 4-year again. So I really enjoy this job. My husband and I moved to New Meadows about 17 years ago from Eagle. We're natives of Idaho, retired dairymen, and I love it up here. It's great. We even stay here all winter long. Surprisingly, a lot of people in New Meadows don't. But I've been married for 46 years and have 2 great, incredible daughters and 3 beautiful granddaughters. So I've been blessed. Worked real hard to get where I am, but I've been blessed, and I really enjoy this job. I think I just wanted to tell you a few of the things that you don't hear about that we do besides the regular county stuff is I serve on the magistrate commission and get to pick judges, all the magistrate judges. I wish we had better people that pick the judges higher up. So maybe we would have some better sentences, right, Ryan? But for some of the bad things that happen in our county that should never happen. But it's a really neat job. There's just local, a couple of lawyers on there, and mostly commissioners and some city mayors on that committee, and it's a great committee to work on. And I enjoy it a lot. You have to do a lot of homework because they usually have a lot of applicants that apply for those magistrate positions, but it's pretty awesome. Then I'm on the Southwest District Health Board. That's a constant battle. They mostly spend federal dollars and they go out and find grants, a lot of them that we don't need and Adams County doesn't benefit from because we're clear up here. So it'd be nice to see something different happen with health districts, but I'm working on that, but don't get too excited. But anyway, it'd be nice to keep that money in our own pockets rather than sending it to Caldwell. So let me see what else. Gosh, I don't know. There's so many committees and stuff that we do. I'm on the Area 3 Aging Committee, and that helps the seniors in our counties and all 6 district counties. And I don't know. I guess that's about it. And if anybody has any questions, I'm here, and I'll answer the questions for you. So,
as you can see, Kyle Harris is not with us. So he's candidate for the legislature, and he was in an auto accident. And he's kind of banged up, so it's difficult for him to travel this far. So I'm going to read a little statement from Kyle. Hello, Kyle Harris, candidate for the legislative seat 7A. I would like to apologize for not being able to attend the event this evening. I was in a pretty severe auto accident a few weeks ago in which I sustained 4 fractured vertebrae and a fractured rib. Due to these injuries, I am not able to sit in a car for the amount of time it would take for me to get there and back. So I'm writing this letter to tell you a little about myself. I am a family man with a wife, 2 children, whom I love and cherish. I own a small electrical contracting business that gives me the freedom to make my schedule so that I will be able to represent all of you in Boise. I have graciously received the endorsements of Rep. Kingsley, Senator Carlson, Citizens Alliance of Idaho, Idaho Freedom PAC, and the Nez County Republican Central Committee. I am pro-life and believe that life begins at conception. I am for limited government and will work to cut spending so that we can lower taxes. I disagree with IACI and would never align with them on anything. I am pro-Second Amendment and will fight to keep the government from infringing on your rights with a tax on ammo or any other scheme that they are trying to pass. I will fight to protect the dams as they are an integral part of our communities, and their removal would be detrimental to our way of life, both financially and economically. I will fight to stop the influx of fentanyl that is coming into our great state through our northern border and destroying our families and our communities. I will work to pass legislation like a curriculum transparency bill that would remove the red tape and make it easier for parents to see what our kids are being taught in public education. And I am for school choice and a voucher system with a caveat that homeschool parents that choose can opt out so that the government cannot get a foothold where they do not have one currently. In the end, I believe that you will find Mr. Chmelik and I are very similar on the issues, and that either one of us will do a good job in Boise as your representative. However, I believe it's time for us to get new ideas, fresh perspective in Boise, someone that will shake things up and fight hard to get what we want. If we keep sending the same type of people to Boise, we will keep getting the same outcomes that we are getting now. And for me, that's not good enough. We must do better so that our kids and grandkids can have a future that will afford them the same freedoms and values that we all had growing up. A freedom from overtaxation and left-wing indoctrination that is tearing away at the very fabric of what we all hold dear. So, with that, I'm asking for your support and your vote so that together we can keep Idaho moving in the right direction towards a brighter future. Kyle Harris. Okay, so our practice will be if you have a question for a candidate or candidates, raise your hand. I'll call on you. You're going to have to stand up and speak. So back there in the back row, I saw your hand go first.
I have a question for Mr. Dunn. I'm concerned that 40% of our state budget is controlled by the federal government. Can you tell me or tell us what you're doing, what Boise is doing to try to reduce that?
I don't frankly see much, if I understand your question, I don't frankly see much that Boise's doing to dial that back. A lot of it is everything from education funding to the forest management, those types of issues. It runs across the gamut of our economy. I think the problem is, one of the hardest things to do as a government is to take away things from people that they get used to. Who's going to vote to take something away in terms of a benefit? So that's actually the kernel of the nut that is the problem with this. We've gotten used to having this money, most of which I understand, and the growth that came with it were the result of COVID and that whole debacle. But the fact of the matter is, if we're not paying for the things that the citizens of this state want and need, and somebody else is, who's dancing to which piper? That's the problem I have. So I could give you a few details if you'd like, or if I'm allowed time, in terms of how I think we could reduce government. But that's the bottom line. We need to start bringing things back under control.
In order to be a state that we are, we have to control our budget. If we're not controlling our budget, it's going to go every way the government wants us.
Absolutely.
Wants it to go.
Absolutely. And and this year, and I believe in recent past years, we've been told we have a balanced budget. Well, that balance is largely due to these federal dollars that's coming in. So we don't actually have a balanced budget. The federal government is helping us do that. And that's offensive to me as a sovereign state, which we are. It's an insult to the 10th Amendment, which says that all powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved for the states, in a nutshell. And that, to me, is a big part of the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And that's a question that should also, I should give the other representatives an opportunity to comment on.
So when you're dealing with federal money, there's a lot of different factors that fall into it. First, all of us that work pay federal income tax. And so saying that we're going to pay federal income tax and get nothing in return is taxation without representation. That being said, there is a role for federal government to pay for our roads. Like, there's no way the state can keep our interstates without federal money. And somebody way before me decided that we wanted Obamacare in the state of Idaho. If we're going to have that program in place, there is absolutely no way the taxpayers of this state can afford that. And again, if I thought we could get rid of it, you'd have my vote in a heartbeat. But without the federal dollars, you think your property taxes are high now. So there is a place for federal money in the state just because we pay our fair share of federal income tax. I know I do. I assume you guys do. Now, where the problem comes in is when there's strings attached to it, like in the education system or in the child care. When they say, we're going to give you this money, but you have to follow these rules, that's when it's a no-go. Nope, not doing it. You're going to send your garbage with their money, keep your money, we don't want it.
Amen.
Give us our damn land back. 67% of the state of Idaho is controlled by the federal government. That's a problem. I've championed this for years. In Idaho County, only 14% of 5.3 million acres is held by the private sector and private property owners. How do you fund roads? How do you fund bridges? How do you fund education when you can't tax your land? And if the federal government wants to say they own the land and the people of America want to say they own the land, then pay us for it. It's just that simple to me. They want to be property owners, pay like the rest of us pay. This is how we've gotten into the debacle that we're in. This is how we wind up with 40% of our budget being funded by the federal government. And like Mr. Shepherd said, when it comes with strings attached, that's got to end. And we need people down there who understand these issues. And I'll build on what Kyle Harris said. He's right. We're just dead on all these issues. The only thing he lacks is the relationships with people down there and across the state that I've worked with for years. And I want to try to bring that expertise for you guys, because you have the same issues here in this community. Vicki Purdy and I talk a lot about what goes on with the Forest Service here. And it's a nightmare. You shouldn't have to deal with it that way. They're stripping us of our recreation opportunities, which brings in dollars to our communities. So you want to solve the problem with our budget? Give us our land back. And when they tell you we can't fight fire, bull crap. Because you know what? If we manage these lands, I'm sorry, this one fires me up, guys. If you manage these lands properly, you don't have catastrophic wildfires. You know what you have? You have wildfires. And we used to put those out. We used to log these lands. You guys used to get the timber dollars off of those lands. You used to support your community. We didn't need all these federal dollars. That's the challenge. The federal government did have a deal with us. Go back to 1914, the Forest Service, when it was set up. We used to get 25% of those funds. Guys, like I said, this one's passionate for me. That's why we're in the debacle we're in. We don't have access to our natural resources the way we should. Thank you.
Yeah, we're back there
Hi there. I've got kind of two questions. I'm Dr. John Keener out in Salmon River Mobile Vet up in New Meadows. And the two questions are kind of the first one's for the candidates, and then the second one leads on to the sheriff candidate afterwards. So I kind of understand what it's like to come to Idaho. I came here from Seattle 24 years ago. My stepfather was murdered. Two close friends were murdered. My babysitter was murdered. I've talked a lot about it. In light of the recent tragedies that we all know about here, I'm very curious of what your views are on what's going on with sentencing. I find some of the sentences here that have been handed down to be absolutely ridiculous. I'm not talking about crime in general. I'm talking murder. For the candidates.
The first one, I don't care. So we voted on for example, we voted on the fentanyl bill this year. And in that bill is a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence if you get caught trafficking fentanyl. And the reason that we're having to do that is because, in my opinion, I'm not going to speak for anybody else, the judges have been too lenient against violent crime and heavy drug use and drug trafficking.
Amen.
If we don't figure out how to make our judges meaner, like my grandma would, and I'm trying to be nice, we're going to take it out of their hands if they don't start cracking down and giving serious sentences to violent crime. And the human trafficking, that's just another huge problem that we're trying to get out in front of. So I think the fentanyl bill that we passed this year that stops the traffic in fentanyl, it was endorsed by all three of my sheriffs. I voted against it even though I knew it was going to, there were some people that were scoring it bad, that bill. So that's not important to me, the score. What's important is the people closest elected officials closest to the people wanted me to support that, so I did.
He voted for it.
Right, yeah, I voted for the sentence.
I would just say ditto to what Charlie said. It's not too complicated. We need to punish people. And when your state is known as a state that punishes people for the crimes they're committing, they usually don't show up. It's not too complicated. So we've got to do that. And if it takes us to put mandatory minimums in there, I used to kind of be an opponent to those because I was worried about how judges, taking something away from the judge, but I also learned how it gets up to that point. And if you have good prosecutors and you have good sheriffs, they're making recommendations that come along. So I don't have a problem with them anymore. And we need to do something. I don't want to be like California. I don't want to be like Seattle. I lived there too for 12 years, by the way. I moved here 24 years ago, just like you. Saw what happens there when you don't control crime. You have to control it. So I agree with what Charlie said, and that's what we got to do.
Hard to top that, I agree. I think the concept of being tough on crime in a state is an attitude that we all need to have, because the fact of the matter is we're back to being influenced by outside forces, everything from the out of control border and the people coming up here to the what I'll call the petty crime or the quality of life crimes that happen. I'm talking about the people that kite checks, that shoplift, that drive without insurance and get in wrecks, all the different types of vandalism that occur. Drug addicts are a problem. They're a problem that need to be dealt with definitively. Everything is connected. John Muir used to talk about that all the time. Drug addiction and out of control drug abuse in a community and a state leads to violent crime. It does lead to murder. It does lead to everything up and down the roster with respect to criminal code. What I see and what I read about is every time you turn around, somebody's getting busted for, where I come from, what would be a sales amount of dope. They're being put into rehabilitation. I mean, this seems to be a trend that the state has, and I write about this on my webpage. The fact of the matter is rehabilitation for drug addicts only works if people want it. Well, if you're facing 5 years in prison or go to a program and get probation, what are you going to choose, right? I think that's a big part of what's wrong with our system, is there is a big push right now towards rehabilitation. Prison has its role, and part of its role for people that affect the quality of life in our communities. And again, I'm getting back to the what I'll call the street level drug user, the people that are buying the fentanyl from the people bringing it in, who absolutely need to be punished if they traffic on our streets or on our highways. But the fact of the matter is those people need to learn also that you don't get to come here and get a free pass. We'll help you if you need help. But if you make yourself a continual problem, you can go have an adult timeout as far as I'm concerned and sit in prison for a couple of years. I've got some experience in this, and being tough on crime also means being tough as human beings and saying you need to change. Thank you.
Doctor, first I want to thank you for recognizing this. This is, Vicki touched on a little bit. I'm telling you, this is the most frustrating thing we're dealing with right now. Our district court judges, so for those of you who don't know, in Adams County, we have a district court judge that comes once a month. It's here on Fridays. He doesn't answer to us. He's out of Caldwell. He answers to Caldwell. He doesn't live here. He doesn't have to look you guys in the eyes when he makes that sentence. He looked you in the eye as long as he's in that courtroom, and then he walks out. I'm so frustrated. I couldn't even tell you. I thank you, Representative Shepard. Him and I talked about this fentanyl bill. This bill was introduced and carried by the Idaho Sheriff's Association. We've got to get control over our district court judges in these kinds of aspects. My guys, I look at them and the amount of time that they spend on an investigation, and I know exactly the investigation you're talking about. And it was heartbreaking for me to sit there in that courtroom and listen to that sentence that was passed out. It was heartbreaking for me to look at that family and hear what this sentence was. We need you guys. We need your help to get involved. A citizen judicial evaluation group, show up so that judge has to see you guys when he's making that sentence. That courtroom is empty. I mean, it's usually us, the attorneys, and that's about it that's in there. Show up. Make that judge have to see you when he's saying, well, you know, I feel sorry for this person for this, that, and whatever reason. Help us. I think our representatives, they're recognizing it. We're seeing it. We're coming up with different solutions. The mandatory minimums, I'm not a fan of them, but when we have judges that are out of control with sentences, we've got to do something, and this was the best option we had. So thank you for recognizing that.
The question was more pointed on murders, right? The worst crime that you can commit in our society. Working where I've worked, I've had the misfortune of having a preliminary investigation on probably close to 100 homicides my first 10 years as a policeman. And most of those were gang related. You know, where I worked, it was gang related crimes were probably 84 to 85% of all the total crimes that were involved. That comes with everything from murder to shootings to intimidation to human trafficking, prostitution, drug sales, you name it. I think there is a place for mandatory minimums. I've seen from where I've worked, guys will go out and kill somebody, mostly gang related is my experience. I haven't worked a gang unit for 8 years, where innocent people get hit. You know, I can remember twice in my career as a young policeman jumping into a car with one of the other officers that were rolling up on a drive-by shooting scene with a baby in my hands or a young toddler in my hands, rushing to the hospital because fire wasn't even there yet. Those types of things. I've seen that, and it sucks. And then you got to go back and tell the families oftentimes this is what happened. And these are innocent victims. You know, little kids that just happened to be hanging out in the apartment building when the drive-by came through. They got hit, not the knuckleheads that were standing over there who were the intended targets. Oftentimes it's a senseless crime. If they're innocent victims or it's a senseless type of a crime, then yeah, I believe in things like the death penalty being an appropriate sentence, you know, handed down. Again, talk about being deterrents as a community, as a state. I've seen communities that were very lax on crime, very lax on sentencing. Some of the cases that I went in and testified as the arresting officer that got kicked out just because, and this person's back out in the street the next day doing the exact same thing. In order to keep this state, keep this community a safe one, then yeah, you definitely got to get the judges involved in knowing what's going on and be able to have some kind of a dialogue with them about what's going on. And like what Ryan said, getting the citizenry involved, have your voices be heard, have your faces be seen when these court cases come up, and that's all important as well. So I'm an advocate for, you know, mandatory minimums on a lot of things, not everything always, because there's always, or not always, there's often mitigating circumstances or extenuating circumstances about how something came about that became involved in the criminal justice system. But particularly for murder, if it can be proven that it was that, then yeah, I'm all for the death penalty sentence.
I was in the courtroom the day Judge Roker made that sentence, and it was really heartbreaking. And the district judges are all appointed by our governor. So that's something that you can all do is write him, because basically Judge Roker, for the second time in a couple of weeks, gave 15 years per life. A mom had tried to leave her husband. She got brave and tried to leave her husband, who was abusing her badly in Caldwell, and the husband blew her head away. Basically, he shot her through the eye in front of her kids. Judge Roker gave him 15 years. He gave the family of the Meehan's 15 years for each one of their loved ones' lives. And it was horrifying. And the worst part, which was absolutely insulting, was he said, if you guys don't like it in 15 years, you can go to the parole board and you can complain about it then. Which made me so angry, because that's his damn job. It's his job to protect the community. When it got to that point, everybody knew who Cody Hart was. Yeah, we should never have to see that guy out on the street ever again. So that's up to us, I guess, to start writing our governor and say, knock it off. You hire some real judges for change.
Don't they have to run for election, though, re-election?
Are they on the ballot, the district judges? But I don't think anybody ever runs
They're
against
never
them.
opposed.
Yeah.
They're never opposed, though, I know.
It can be done, though. We had a Supreme Court judge here, I don't remember, it's probably been 10, 15 years ago, who tried to give our water away, and agriculture went nuts, and I know because I was one of those agriculture people that went nuts about it. We got rid of her, got a better judge in there, so you can do it. You just got to find somebody to run against him.
Okay, very good. I just want to intervene briefly here on this question, because my observation is that mandatory minimums are, in a sense, a Band-Aid for a judicial problem. Judges being too lenient, that kind of thing. So the legislature doing mandatory minimums doesn't do anything to fix, in the long term, a judicial problem. Judicial problems are clearly not easy to fix. But I'm wondering if any of you candidates for State House have any comments or thoughts about the judicial selection process in Idaho and how we might fix it.
I think when you have, as Mr. Purdy mentioned, I think when you have the chief executive as the one who is doing the selecting, I don't know this to be a case, but that makes me highly suspicious of the motivations behind the people running and this whole, who knows why and how they're actually selected. I don't know. I've worked for a couple of Superior Court judges in my day, and the process by which they get put up to the court is initially a governor's appointment, but then they have to stand for election when that term expires, be it 3 months or a year after they're appointed. That you have a situation where you don't have anybody running against them is a big problem. I think that, to me, it's not all that much different than your representatives, your governor, or our federal representatives at all. We have to have a way to rate and vet these people, all of us, myself included, and to say, who are they? What do we know about them? And how do they stack up against whatever measure we want to use that is objective and that is agreed to be a good measurement? But when you have what are essentially political appointments, which is what I think I heard just described, being involved in selecting our judges, that's a problem. That couldn't be more disconnected to the people, choosing those who represent them. And the judges are supposed to represent us. And so I think the process needs to be reformed so that it's closer to us, and that we have some means of saying, this is what we want in a judge, and you don't measure up, and maybe you do. Why don't you get on the ballot? That sort of thing, if that makes sense.
So we had essentially a reform bill before us, and we could not get enough support in the House to get that bill passed. And it's very complicated how it works. Essentially, the way it's working right now is judges are deciding who gets to be judges. And my best fix is to just impeach the one like the district judge here. Unfortunately, the House doesn't have that ability. You'll have to talk to the Senate.
What do you mean when you say judges selecting judges?
There's a committee or a judicial review that's all judges, and they're the ones that essentially give and don't quote me verbatim on this because it's very complicated, but they're the ones that give the recommendations to the governor, and then the governor takes that forward.
Except the magistrates, they're not picked that way.
Okay.
Those are selected. I mean,
Yeah.
elected.
They're selected by the committee,
Okay.
the magistrate commission, which is
Okay.
county and city officials, yeah.
Okay, we'll come back.
So this is something, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't have 100% clarity on it, so I don't like to talk about things I don't know about it, but I'm more than willing to do the research on it. But I do know from the standpoint of political appointments from the governor, It depends on your governor, guys, what kind of judge you're gonna get, if that's the case. And then it comes back to us. If these magistrate judges are out there and we need to find somebody to run against them. And we need to be held accountable too for our district and what goes on in it. What goes on here, what goes on in Idaho County, and what goes on in Nez Perce County. So, like I said, I don't have a clear, big picture of this whole thing. I am more than happy to research it. But from that standpoint of politics, I hate to say it, but politics is politics, and the governor makes appointments to all types of things. And I can tell you, I've seen conservative governors that do things that I didn't agree with. I've seen moderate governors do things that I didn't agree with. I've also seen both sides of things I do agree with. So again, it comes down to us, who we voting for, who we put in office to make these decisions for us. I'm all for what, you had a reform bill down there. If that's what it takes to do it, that's the kind of stuff I would support. Try to get the right judges put in place. Again, I just don't have a clear picture of the whole thing right now, so it's not something I know a lot about.
Hey, and I appreciate that these guys are, I mean, none of us are experts on everything, right? And there's a lot of stuff to deal with. And so to say, hey, I'm not real clear on the process, I appreciate that. But would you raise your right hand now and swear after me?
I'm not going to stand up because I can't.
That's okay.
Just a quick comment about the sentencing. In the 24 years I was county clerk, I worked with judges that literally would have hung that guy if they'd have been on the bench. But this guy wasn't. That's just people. I'd like to ask our state representatives what you think about breaching the dams on the Columbia River. To me, it is devastating to this Northwest. You guys that are...
Well, for 22 years, I've battled with the water issues with the Farm Bureau. And you take those dams out and you're gonna, that's just the start, guys. That's just the beginning. You take those out off the Columbia.
We have one congressman and a president that are in favor of it.
Very, very familiar with that, and I know Mike Simpson.
Scary.
And him and I are not in agreement, but we also have two senators and another congressman who are opposed to it.
Thankfully.
So it's a battle, but I think we can win this one. I just think it means too much to the Northwest, and we cannot. Just from the standpoint of what's happened up in our local community, just the transportation issue. We've lost our railroads up in Idaho County to get our grain, the farmers' grain down there. So now they got to truck it. And if you lose those barges, you cannot pay to take the wheat to Portland. I mean, even if you got it down there and the rails are going that way, it gets cost prohibitive. I've talked to them. My family. My wife's family are big farmers up on the prairie. It's a big hot button issue. I'm totally 100% opposed to taking those dams out, because if you can get those dams out,
Right.
they'll take the rest of them out, guys.
Yep.
Not to mention the ecological damage it's going to cause. What's behind those dams?
Yeah.
Okay, all the years all the stuff that's been coming down from these forest fires. You know what happens when a forest fire, and especially the size of forest wildfires we have now, these catastrophic wildfires? Trees take arsenic out of the ground. They take lead out of the ground. They take aluminum out of the ground. Where do you think it goes when it rushes down into our rivers and everything? That's where it goes, and it's behind those dams. We got to keep it there. Unless somebody come up with a really good solution, how are you going to irrigate? How are you going to transport? How are we going to recreate? Those dams mean the world to this community, and I totally oppose taking those dams out.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more with what Mr. Chmelik said. The bottom line is, I don't think I've ever heard of a worse idea in my life as a matter of somebody promoting this as a public policy. I approach pretty much everything with a biblical worldview, and the Bible's pretty clear that God gave man dominion over the earth and all the things in it. As far as I'm concerned, not to oversimplify the issue, but if it comes down to a few fish and the welfare of District 7, I'm going to side with District 7.
So out of everybody up here, I'm the only one that's had the opportunity twice to vote for a resolution saying the state of Idaho will not tear those dams out. It's really frustrating that the same person sitting at the White House who wants this Green New Deal wants to take out the cheapest, most reliable form of energy and the recreation and agriculture that comes with it. It makes no sense to me to tear a dam out. I'm probably one of the reasons I'm in trouble with big business down there is I want to build more dams. Because to me, that's the only thing that makes sense. But you can't say that out loud because it's politically incorrect.
It's a damn bad idea.
Yeah, that's right.
I have heard every one of you talk about getting tough on a lot of your laws, but I have yet to see it. When somebody murders someone, they need to be murdered themselves. Put them up against a wall and shoot them. How many people do you think you're going to have to shoot if you shoot one or two of them? They're all going to leave the state or not do it.
Right.
It's a get tough area. Get tough on them.
Again, out of everybody sitting here, I'm the only one that's had the privilege of voting for reestablishing the firing squad and funding it for the state of Idaho. You got a volunteer.
How many do you think you're going to have to shoot before they leave the area or they stop?
I agree with you 100%. I don't think you're going to have to shoot very many. The problem that we have sitting
One down there now that needs to be shot.
in the position that we are here, there's obviously the system is set up with three separate branches of government. So you have the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. And we have to be very careful not to interfere with the other branch of government. And like we said earlier, about the only thing we can do with the House side is to put mandatory minimums in. If we have to do that for murder, then so be it.
I have a question for Mr. Rowland. So the sheriff has one legislative duty to run the jail. It's a two-part question. Could you tell us what your experience is with managing the daily operations budgets at a correctional facility? Second part, what's the budget for the jail in Adams County?
I'll answer in reverse order. I'm not sure what the budget for the jail is. I know that it's subsidized through the state for housing inmates from Idaho Department of Corrections, and I believe it's somewhere north of $400,000 revenue that's generated from that effort. As far as my experience working with jails, I was a jailer for a small police department early in my career, where I was responsible for a jail that had a maximum capacity. I believe it was something like 15 or 20 inmates, something like that, with a drunk tank. And yeah, it was a small police department, 20 officers all the way from the chief of police down. Working for a larger police department, I wasn't the jailer, but I was often, pulled out of patrol to go work the jail and help supervise the jailers that were in there when they were short on staffing. So I have some experience dealing with that. The jail capacity for that department was north of 75, I believe it was. It was a larger jail facility. But I don't know what the budget is for the jail currently. I don't.
Thank you. Over here.
This is for the sheriff and the candidates. I'm a retired prosecutor, and I've never worked with a lot of officers and agents and so forth. I've never seen law enforcement so poorly paid as in this county. It's embarrassing. I've dealt with a lot of dispatch centers, and I'll compliment you, Ryan. Your dispatch people are the best I've ever had. They respond. They call you by your first name, maybe because I call so often. I don't know. But my question for you, Ryan, and then Ken, I think there clearly is a staffing problem. They're underpaid. We have 2 deputies in New Meadows, which are great. I mean, I see Matt going up 95 by himself at night, and it's like you should not be working out there by yourself. And you know, it's dark, particularly by Meadow Creek. There's no lighting, and I think the 2 deputies that we have are outstanding. I don't think you can have an effective enforcement of the law, and I know there's such a thing as too much law enforcement, but there's also something as not enough law enforcement, particularly when it comes to narcotics, which I've done for almost 20 years, and including marijuana, and which I have no tolerance for whatsoever. And I want to know what your plan is, Ryan, for increasing the pay of the deputies that we do have, enhancing the number of deputies so that more cases can be worked that deserve working, like violent crime that's been spoken about here, and also what Ken's plan is to generate more interest in young people becoming law enforcement, because I love law enforcement. My dad thought that at some point I would be a member of a country club, be a senior partner. I said, Dad, that's not me. And if I had to do it all over again, I'd be enforcing the law because I believe in it. I happen to like mandatory minimums when they're appropriate, and usually they are appropriate. There are exceptions to it that you can find ways to do the right thing. But to leave it up to liberal judges who are trying to change what's happening in the country, it's just, we've got to get control of it. So I want to narrow actually your answers, if you would, to the staffing issue, to the pay issue, and how we can encourage more young people to be interested in law enforcement.
Thank you. So, thank you. And I'll start out by saying most everybody here knows that unfortunately we're losing our prosecutor to Canyon County, most likely in May. So we do have a spot for a prosecutor. Just throw that out there to start with. It is frustrating. So the way Idaho's set up, we're set up on a justice fund levy. So we can only levy, it's 0.0019, whatever it is. We're at the max. And that is our main source of income. We're on pace right now to bring in over it's going to be about $560,000 from the state for housing state inmates. We're over $40,000 a month that we're bringing in off that, which really helps on our jail side of things. Our total budget in the jail is about $680,000. It's going to be less than $100,000 difference between revenue versus what it costs us to operate that jail. So that's one thing that we're trying to do. The commissioners worked with me this last year to salvage what deputies we had, to bring up wages. So we are up significantly from what we were. Problem being, as you guys all know, 4 years ago, Adams County had our property values were roughly $700 million 3 years ago. 1.2 billion last year. The value's going up. What that means is the houses are going up. So I've got my wages up to $30 an hour. You can't find a house for under $400,000. So $30 an hour doesn't make enough. That's still not enough. So I'm not sure what we're going to do. I'm working with our commissioners. We've looked into different ideas. We've discussed, we all hate the idea of raising taxes. We hate higher taxes, but we've discussed the options of a levy of some sorts. I don't know that that's a possibility. We're being as creative as we can to work with what we have. But just like it's been said several times here, Adams County is over 60% public land, which means we're getting pennies on the dollar for that. We can't afford to take care of our land, to take care of our people, based on what we're drawing on taxes. So we're asking 40% to pay for all of that. Adams County is a really unique place. All of us neighboring places to the great state of Ada continually draw recreation. In the summer, it's nothing for Adams County to be 15,000 population, particularly during elk season. And I think about 14,000 are hunting the same ridge I'm on. So it's really frustrating that we have to deal with that. But we have the obligation, and we have to protect not just you guys as the citizens of Adams County, but those other 14,000 people that are coming up here to recreate as well. So I don't really have a good answer for you. The Sheriff's Association did introduce a bill, I want to say 2 years ago, where we tried to get that levy limit raised. And I don't think it even came out of committee. I think it was shot down pretty quickly. Our legislators, again, I pay taxes too. I don't want to see my taxes go up, but at some point we have to figure something out to be able to do the job that we're being asked to do. As far as the recruiting goes, I'm super excited. It's kind of cool. I now have 2 deputies working for me that I coached in high school basketball. And it's kind of neat. I was going through my deputy list the other day, and I've got 5 deputies working there that either were part of my church youth group that my wife and I have been doing for over 20 years, or that I coached in basketball. So we are recruiting some of these folks. We're getting them in here. They're interested. They're enjoying it. But the sad part of it is, look at our military. The numbers in the military are going down. People who want to stand up and fight for this country, who want to stand up and do something, that interest is going away. And we are struggling with the same thing that is going nationwide. So we're fighting, we're trying. I don't know the answer, but we've got to figure out, for the housing thing, it's a supply and demand issue. And right now, the demand is way higher than the supply. And so the prices can do whatever they want. And until we figure out a way to bring in more building and more houses to make it more affordable, I don't really have an answer. So we're working on it, and we're trying. But that's the best I've got.
Recruitment and retention is an issue everywhere. I mean, nationwide. I've worked background investigations. I was the sergeant in charge of a personnel training unit where we were responsible for recruitment, finding individuals to, good qualified people, doing their background investigations, all that kind of stuff, hiring them, seeing them through the academy program, and then through their field training and through their years of probation. It's a difficult task. When you're talking about financing benefits and salary for employees, for any county, anywhere, probably, well, not anywhere, but probably the most places in the country, it's a difficult thing because the money's not there. It's based on, property values and stuff has already been said. So what do? I worked for a police department where we had contracts, we had unions and everything, a little bit different than how things are run here. Where I went 8 years without a contract because there just wasn't any money. And we lost very few people during that period of time. And what I attributed to that personally was the working conditions and the environment. That, it was tough. It was a busy place. We worked a lot of free hours. There wasn't the, overtime paid for you at the end of 8 hours if you were still booking your body or booking your property or whatever. Sometimes it was just expected that you just did that to get the job done. Not saying that I advocate that, but sometimes that's what needs to be done. As far as housing and things of that nature, it requires unconventional thinking, creativity. There was a city that I knew years and years ago. I went to the academy with a couple of officers that went to that agency, and they were strictly industrial. There was no homes or anything in the whole city. So what the city did to retain people, and they were one of the lowest paid law enforcement agencies in the county at the time, they actually built a neighborhood. The city, however they did it, I'm not sure how they did it, but they basically built a neighborhood for employees. And there was probably 4 or 5 police officers that lived in that community. And that got it started. I'm seeing in other states now where there's financial incentives, where they will pay you up to, however many thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars towards putting a down payment on a home. That's creative stuff that I never saw back when I was new. That was never a thing. But the situation is the same everywhere. As far as trying to work with the youth and gather the youth into the programs, I'm a product of the Explorer program, which is a youth program for, it's affiliated with Boy Scouts of America, but kind of not so much anymore. But it's for interested kids, ages 14 to 20, and it's not just law enforcement. There's fire, there's EMTs, there's nursing, there's all kinds of different things. Honda even has an Explorer program to bring kids in to teach them the trades of automobile repair. This would be a good program to implement here, and it's not a big program for a community like this. If you get 4 kids that are interested in law enforcement, you bring them in, you teach them about citizenship, you teach them about volunteerism, you teach them about leadership, about community involvement, giving back, and you mentor those kids. And say you get one that comes in at 16, 17 years old, and by the time they're 18 years old, they've been working with your officers, your deputies, coming in and volunteering for different things for a year, 2 years. So you get an idea who these kids are, if they're good kids or not. You got an opening for, say, a jailer or for a detention officer, dispatcher, what have you. Instead of putting it out and hoping somebody puts in an application, you can go to that person, that kid, and say, hey, we got this opening, are you interested? My first paid police job happened just like that. I was a police explorer for a couple of years. I learned all the operations inside, how to work the computers, the phones, the desks, the jail. Excuse me. And they had a jailer leave. It was a dispatcher jailer position. And because it was a civil service job, it took a while for them to put out the announcement for the job, do testing, all this other kind of stuff. They came and asked me if I would take the job. And I'm like, yeah, you're going to pay me to do what I've been doing for free for the last couple of years. I'm all in. And I was supposed to be there for 2 years, or for 2 months. I ended up being there for 2 years. And then that opened another door and another door. And I progressed throughout my law enforcement career. So it is a good program. My last 5 years on the job, I was in charge of that program for the largest sheriff's department in the country. And I had over 500 kids at 20 different patrol stations, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of those kids that I help mentor that come up are all deputy sheriffs now. A lot of them are deputy sheriffs now. Probably in the 12 years I was running the Explorer Academy, not just the 5 years that I did it full time, there's probably on my former department at least 30 kids that got into the business. A lot of them went to the military first and came back. First thing they did, they applied and they're in. One of my kids just graduated last month. So there's a viable program. It's a way to get local interest, kids from the community, to be involved in what's going on and hopefully get them interested in this as a potential career down the line. And if they go off and do something else, that's fine, but they're going to take a piece of that program with them. And they may, like I said, the ones that went to the military, they may end up coming back and saying, hey, I want to come back to where I started from. I miss it. I know what's going on. Those people go through training a lot quicker. Those people tend to stick around a lot longer. Those people tend to work a little bit harder than, say, somebody that comes from another community to come in to be a police officer or deputy sheriff. So I think that's a viable program that could work in this community.
Thank you. Okay, so you get your hands down. Wait, do you think this is school? No, just kidding. So if you've raised your hand and I've missed you a couple times, I'm sorry. If that's you, would you stand up? Because I don't want to keep missing people. Thank you.
Howdy, gentlemen. My name is Cole Keener. It's my dad, Dr. John, back there. My question, so through this panel, public lands has been discussed quite a bit. It's something that I personally care about a lot. As the son of a business owner in our community, I want to see our area, we're in New Meadows, I'd like to see New Meadows grow economically, and public lands is part of that, both for recreation and for extracting some resources that need to go to the great industries that make Idaho awesome. I've lived in a lot of different states through my time in the military, particularly the East Coast, and there was some good and bad. But one of the reasons I decided I wanted to settle back down in Idaho permanently was that there's no public land on the East Coast, and what little there is, frankly, sucks for recreating. I like being able to go out to the Frank Church or the Gospel Pump with my pack, my rifle, and go elk hunting or deer hunting or chasing bears or whatever. I agree that I want some of those lands to be put to productive use, but I'm going to need some assurances from you guys that are running for these positions in our district that you guys aren't just going to privatize it all, and the next time I want to go hunting, I'm going to have to pay some Californian developer bastard a fee to be able to go visit the lands that I've been enjoying since I was a boy. So, if you guys, I'd love to give you guys the opportunity to kind of speak to the specifics of where do you draw the balance between, hey, we need to privatize some of these parcels, get some logging back in or mining or whatever it is, but also making sure that generations of Idahoans are going to be able to recreate in this wonderful place we got for generations to come. Thank you.
It's a great question, and I've championed transfer of public lands back to the states for years. One of the caveats I wanted in there was make sure we have to add a constitutional amendment to our state that says those lands will stay public. Now, there are a few parcels here and there that actually sit inside a private area, and they're surrounded by private property. Let's just give that owner first opportunity at that. But those are the rare cases. Those lands, we've grown up with them, part of our tradition. So that's what I championed when I was talking about transfer of public lands. You also already have a built-in natural resource department in the Forest Service to help you take care of them. You find those good people who want to take care of our forests, who want to manage our forests, who want to extract the natural resource, where we're good stewards of the land. That's what we're supposed to be. That's what we're called. Mr. Dunn has brought it up. We're supposed to have dominion over the land. And I agree with you. We need to have that. It brings in dollars to our community we otherwise wouldn't get if it's all privatized. I totally get that. So that's what we would need to do. And like just simply manage those lands. This is not complicated. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, guys. We can. It's getting over that hurdle of the government just does. The federal government understands this. They understand owning all this land, what it means. Are any of you guys familiar with NACs? Have you heard that term, NAC? Natural Asset Companies? Anybody familiar with that? I don't see anybody going up and down. I see everybody know. This was an attempt by the elites to take and literally semi-privatize our public lands and then trade them on the New York Stock Exchange. And they were going to trade, you're going to love this, on how Mother Nature operates, how honey's made, how nectar is made, how photosynthesis works. They were going to put values on that and then trade those like carbon credits. This is sinister, guys. This is sinister. Like I said, I stay on top of this stuff. We need to get that land back in our states because the one thing you cannot do constitutionally is have a republic form of government if you don't have your land, guys. You can't. It's impossible because you don't have access to your natural resources like the rest of the country. That's what we need to do. It's just, it's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple explanation. I support that constitutional amendment, and I support keeping our public lands public, except for those few little landlocked areas. Let's sell them, okay? But those are rare cases. So that's my solution.
May I ask a quick follow-up to that?
Let's give the other guys an opportunity to respond.
So, I've been hunting this area, the Salmon River drainage, up into meadows, and back in high school, you would go ask and you could hunt just about anywhere. Very seldom was there a no. And then Potlatch and some of the big timber companies sold out to, you guys probably familiar with the Wilkes brothers. Yeah. And all of that got locked up. The misconception there that some people think is that that was public land. That was never public land, that was always private. And it's very frustrating when I'm in the position I am now when I can go talk to those people and they still won't budge. For whatever reason, they will not let public access go in there except for their friends or buddies. But because so much hunting ground has been locked up since I was in high school around here, I under no circumstances will let or want the government to buy any public property and take it off of access. Multiple use means we can log it and we can hunt it and we can recreate however you want in it. Doesn't mean we can't, because we're logging we have to lock it up, or because this is for the backpackers we can't log it. It doesn't work like that, and it shouldn't work like that. So I personally am not in favor, even the Fish and Game buying private property down on the Little Salmon for salmon fisher to access the river. I understand why they're doing that, and it's a shame that they have to do that. But even when you do that, now they just took that private property off the tax rolls and made it harder for our sheriffs and our schools and everybody to be funded by the property tax. So just rest assured, I am not ever in favor of public lands being sold to the private.
I think the points that have been made are excellent. To answer your question, sir, about an assurance, what makes sense to me is to start from where the problem began. And I don't know about you, but I've never found in the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, where it gives the federal government the right to own land in the first place. That's a problem. Okay, that's what the root of all this is. In terms of what we do moving forward, I'm in favor of an incremental approach. And I'm one of those guys that'll tell you that government is best, which governs least, and the closer to the people, the better the decisions that get made, the better the quality of the decisions. What am I driving at? I'd like to see there be an incremental taking back by the state of Idaho of those, what I'll call federal lands, whatever they happen to be, forest lands or whatever, with rare exception, I mean, perhaps national parks, that sort of a thing. And what I'd like to see is an incremental retaking of those by the state of Idaho, then the management of those back to what is the next level of our system, the way we have it set up, and that would be the counties. And that the county then decides, based on the will of the people, the balance of how much is available to get sold to the public, if any, or not. That may seem like an oversimplified answer to the question, but to me it is really honestly that simple. We're all Americans, but we're all Idahoans. That land is in our boundaries, and we're a sovereign state, and we have the right to manage our own land.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll let you follow.
Okay, just a quick follow-up. I like your guys' answers. I don't disagree with necessarily everything that's been said. It sounds like there's a consensus that instead of having these lands around us, these federal lands being managed by the feds paying the tax bill to fund that, manage that, whatever management means, you guys want the state to do it. But earlier today, you guys have also talked about how the state of Idaho's government is too big and we're getting taxed too much. And so there's kind of it doesn't quite balance out to me that on one hand, we should take those lands back and not have the feds get involved with it. But on the other hand, the state of Idaho doesn't have a lot of money, and what money we do have, we're wasting it. So maybe the state of Idaho should start paying for managing those lands. I'm just curious, how do you thread the needle on that to you guys? Because it sounds like privatization isn't also super popular with y'all. So just like a little bit of clarification on that.
You thread the needle by what you make off managing those natural resources and the timber dollars that come off of them. Idaho County, believe it or not, used to be one of the richest counties in the entire state because of the 25% funds that we got off the federal forest. It was a big deal. We got 25% for the grazing. We got 25% for the minerals it was extracted off of them. It's a pretty easy needle to actually thread. Now here's your big challenge. Who's going to be in charge? Mr. Dunn made a really good point. Local authorities from the county commissioners need to be in place in managing and being part of this, because when you get it closest to the people, I don't want Boise dealing with it. I want us in Idaho County. I want you in Adams County. I want Nez Perce County's commissioners to manage their lands in their neck of the woods. That's how you do it, because if you're not doing a good job at the local level, guess what happens? You vote them out. Not too complicated. That's how you do it. That needle is not too hard to thread. We just have to decide we can do things like this. We've had for too long, we've been told we can't do things. I don't like that word. I've never told my kids they can't do something, unless it's something I really don't want them to do. Okay? But as far as them being successful at something, I've never discouraged them. We got to stop with this attitude that we can't do stuff. We can. We can do those things. That's how you thread that needle. It's really not that complicated.
So I don't care what business you're in, if you mismanage it, you're going to go broke or it's going to cost you a lot of money. The federal forests have been so mismanaged that to say that you can't make money with that resource sitting there strictly because it's totally mismanaged. A fire starts, you have to let that fire burn until it's big enough to be a project fire, so now you can make take a whole bunch of tax money to put that fire out. That's total mismanagement. If the state of Idaho and the Department of Lands had the ability to manage the federal land like they do the state land, we wouldn't have to worry about our sheriffs not having enough money to pay their deputies.
That's right.
We wouldn't have to worry about running levies to fund our schools.
That's right.
So there's a misconception that's been sold by the media that it costs a lot of money to take timber out of the woods. It does cost something, but if it's managed correctly, you will make a profit at the end of the day and manage it. I would love to be able to manage it. So.
Very simply, I could not agree more with what's been said. And the bottom line is I know there's enough people probably in this room alone with the experience that we have and the interest that we have based on the size of this crowd that we could manage our lands better, and I'll even say profitably, than what's being done right now. I know it. We just need to find a way to open the gate and to get that to happen, which gets back to my concept of incrementally taking back what's ours in the first place.
Just so you all know, believe it or not, our little county has taken some steps and done some things that nobody else in the country has done. So we have a lot of the problem people don't understand. So the Biden administration has put forward an old growth plan that they want to implement. They also put forward rule changes in the rules that allow one person in an agency to have discretion over an entire decision. They also put into place they no longer need public involvement. So what we say doesn't really matter a whole lot. I could go on and on and on because I have a whole list of things, and we are working with Congress right now to try to make a difference, and we can make a difference. They want to burn 1.3 million acres of the Payette National Forest, and they have 45 years to do it. I doubt it'll take that long at the rate they're going, but that's 52,000 acres a year, and I don't know about you guys, but the smoke is not pleasant to breathe day in and day out all summer long. So I've been complaining about that. DEQ is doing their best. They're on it. They only have one smoke guy, and they don't have equipment anywhere but McCall. So they find a finding of no significant impact on all their burns because to them there's no significant impact. But to us there is, because we live here and we breathe that smoke. So there is so much more, and it's too long to go into. But they have been working on NACs on the forest since 2012. And so that's still going on. And they're trying to they've taken cooperating agency status away from us as counties now. And they just did it through rulemaking, and they did it in the Obama administration, but they didn't do anything about it, so nobody knew about it until we found out about it. So during the Trump administration, they just kept it quiet. So there's a lot of rule changes that have happened, and we have made comments. We are the only county in the entire country that actually made comments on the big burn plan and on the old growth plan. So believe it or not, we're fighting really hard for you because this is a huge issue for us. And it can be done. We had a fantastic ranger in New Meadows that got 4 projects put together in 3 months. The trick was that she knew what she was doing. She was really smart. And she didn't have a forest supervisor who was only involved and interested in the political side of it. She was actually interested in managing the forest. So they cleaned up a whole bunch of new meadows on the side of our mountain over there. You can see it from where I live. They cleaned up a whole bunch of dead trees that would eventually burn. So what we need is the fires put out. We need less money going to FEMA and more money going to the Forest Service to put them out. We need the Forest Service to start doing NEPA again, which they have stopped doing now because they don't have to, because they changed the rules. So anyway, there's a lot more than that, but I'll shut up.
Could I add something to that?
Control yourself. No.
I just want to add what Vicky's talking about. A lot of people don't know this. We grow annually 1.4 billion board feet of timber in the state of Idaho. Don't tell me there's not a market for it. The environmentalists like to tell you they're creating a carbon sink. Okay, that's a lie. Okay, you know how you sink carbon? You grow it up, you cut it down, you cut it into 2x4s, and you sink it in the wall, and you grow it again, and you sequester more carbon out of the air. They're burning it down. They're putting more carbon back in the air on top of the arsenic, the lead, the aluminum, and everything else these things soak up out of the ground. Because that's what trees do. They take all this stuff in out of the soil. So when people tell you, just remember this. Why aren't we logging 1.4 billion? You don't have to log. Why aren't we just logging a third of that? We should be logging it all. But just log a third of it, guys. Sink it in walls. Tell the environmentalists to go stick it where the sun doesn't shine. Sorry. These things fire me up, okay?
Okay, so I am aware that there is a heavy presence of people gathered tonight because of our original advertisement that this was originally slated to be a sheriff's forum. So with that in mind, right now I'm feeling like my random selection process may be falling a little short of that. So I would like to manipulate just for a little bit and take the next 3 or 4 questions directly for sheriff's candidates. So we'll start over here.
Yes, my name is Janet Terry. We've had several businesses here. We've been in Idaho since the 70s. And my grandson is chief deputy police in Kenn County. They have a lot of the problems that we have here in Adams County, only theirs is a much larger county. And I realize that our county is one of the poorest counties in the state of Idaho. Given that, we get good deputies that come in, we send them to post and we train them, and they work maybe for a year or 2, and then they can't make a living, and they have to move someplace else where they get more money, but we pay for them to go to post. I would think, I know that the sheriff's office's hands are pretty much tied at their level, but I would think that the higher ups in government should be able to come up with some kind of, like you said, an incentive plan to keep our deputies, once they've been trained in the poorer counties, so that we have law enforcement that is equal to some of the larger counties, so that we can compete with the larger counties. Because they're just going to keep leaving if we don't have enough money to take care of them. And I know a lot of them. I've known Ryan for a really, really long time. I think he's a very fair sheriff. I like him as a sheriff. And I'm not blaming him for any of this because he can't do anything about it. You know, he's governed by who or whatever is above him. So I would like for somebody to come up with a decent idea as to what we could do about that.
In a sentence, that's a sheriff's question that's kind of directed at the representatives with an idea that, hey, do you guys have thoughts about maybe some creative funding ideas for rural counties, for law enforcement, that kind of thing?
So I'll answer from our perspective. My good friend Sheriff Thomas is out here, so don't listen too close. We actually are one of the higher paid counties right now. However, with that said, like I talked about a little bit ago, the cost of living has gone up so much here alone, it just doesn't balance out. So I don't know, Janet, I wish I had a crystal ball. The commissioners, we've sat there and scratched our heads and we're all going the same thing. What do we do? What do we do? Representative Boyle just walked in a few minutes ago. She has been a very big advocate to getting counties money and trying to figure out ways to fund counties. There's been talk of all sorts of different stuff, but it's going to have to come through legislative for us to get any more money. A lot of people don't understand it. Everybody was concerned about, and myself included, my house went up $200,000 in value, and it's, oh my goodness, my taxes are going way up. The county can only raise 3%. So it doesn't matter what it went up. You're stuck at that limit. That's all that can be raised. So property values going up. Like I said, we went from 700 million to 1.2 billion. Was it 3 years? That change? Outrageous amount of change, and it's gonna hit us even harder with what's going on at Brundage. It's scary. Anybody who's been to New Meadows, look at their building their second new housing development for Brundage citizens. And it's going to affect us. It's going to have a tremendous effect on us because those are going to be workers. Those are going to be people that are part of our community that we have to figure out a way to protect, and we have to figure out a way to serve.
Can I add something to that right quick?
Yeah.
I know that some of the apartments out there are supposed to be low rent housing. They're starting at $1,500 a month. And a rental around town, because my granddaughter's a paralegal and she's going to be getting married, and they've been looking for housing all over. And $1,500 is like a low minimum, and it goes up from there. So if they don't come up with a program where the law enforcement could actually have a decent living environment with something that they can actually pay on what they're getting that would help compensate them to stay in this area.
So I think the best answer, I talked to Representative Shepard about this just today. The levy limit's got to be raised. The Sheriff's Association took that a few years ago, and it, like I said, it didn't even come out of committee. Nobody wants to pay more property taxes, myself included. However, how long do we allow this to continue to happen? Because you're not wrong. We're losing deputies. And a lot of it, too, is we're not fast enough paced for them. I remember my first 5 years as a deputy, it was a lot more fast paced. And these young guys, they like to go. We call them high speed, low drag. And now I'm low drag. So they like that faster pace. And I don't want that fast pace here. I want to preserve what we have. I like the way it is here. But to keep deputies that are looking for that, that's a challenge in itself. So I think, sorry guys, it falls back to you to figure out a revenue.
I got something to say.
For what it's worth, it's been that way forever.
We worked together, Mike. I started with you, and it was.
I know. That's why we moved here.
So one creative way that the state is trying to help that situation is there's a program called the Good Neighbor Authority. And what that is it's state foresters partnering with the Forest Service, and essentially that the federal government is allowing state foresters to go in and run a timber sale. And it kind of supersedes some of the environmental regulations that a federal sale has. And that's been very successful because every log we take off our federal land, money comes into the county to help pay sheriffs and schools and such. So this year we passed a bill 614 that added 3 more positions to the Good Neighbor Authority so that they can put more timber sales up and sell more timber off of federal land. So that's one way, creative way, without raising taxes, and that's always my number one mission is try to figure out a way to do it without raising taxes.
When they cut these trees, do they replace the trees and do it?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Not on Wilkes Brothers land.
Not to oversimplify this, because this is a discussion I've heard for decades. It's not unique to just us with respect to the balance of law enforcement, population, and the economy, and how do you get adequate funding. Nobody's got the perfect answer. I don't have a creative solution, but what I do have is an interest in looking at trying to find the way to reduce the size of the state government. The fact of the matter is, I think the bureaucracy and I think the number of departments that this state has are not only exceed what ought to be the rightful role of government in the first place, and law enforcement is chief among those, and so that ought to be a priority. But I don't think it has to be an either-or situation. I think we do the hard work, we break a sweat, and we find where we can reasonably cut, and then we increase the funding for law enforcement. It's just like you do in your households. You need something, you got to take the money from somewhere, and something doesn't get done. It's a give and take. It's constantly a give and take. But why does it always have to be a grow the government thing? That doesn't work for me. I don't know about you, but it doesn't.
It's my understanding the Health and Welfare Department has doubled since COVID. Representative Boyle, is it now the largest part of the budget, I believe? Charlie, is that true, health and welfare?
County, state, and federal, yes.
Largest part of the budget. We pay people not to work. We pay people not to do things, and then we're talking about people who want to work. I don't know how you can move those funds around. I don't know if there's a creative solution for that. The solution Charlie talked about is a good one. It's a good start with these good neighborhood authorities. We've been getting progress in Idaho County with that. And we need more of that on the ground. But when we pay people not to work, it's a huge, huge problem. And when that department has become the behemoth it has since COVID, I think something has to happen there. I really, really do. In our Department of Education, used to be the largest part of the budget. That one still is another issue, okay, with me. So we need to find creative ways to get funding down to those things that government is supposed to do, and law enforcement is one of them. Roads is another one. I think we've gotten way off track with things government does that it should not be doing.
Amen.
And we need to get ourselves back on track with what we're doing and find people who want to go down and get creative solutions and get down and get dirty and stand there and take the heat over it, because it's not going to be easy.
Okay, sheriffs, questions?
I am getting into My question is for Mr. Roller. When you first came in, you introduced yourself, you said you're from California. I get that. I'm from Vegas. It's a total different environment. You cannot compare LA and Compton to Council, Idaho. It's different. We don't have the gangs here. Yes, there are drugs here. There seem to be more drugs here now that Oregon lost their mind and decriminalized so much crap. You said that you want to bring this department, have them do more trainings and bring this department up to par, or whatever your wording was. How exactly do you think that you can do that with your creative ways to pay for things? Like, we don't have the money here. We don't have the funding. What exact creative ways can we bring those in? You answered part of my question because I was curious about the Explorer thing. You said these kids come in and they volunteer to do this stuff. Well, kids talk. So if you bring teenagers into that environment, they're going to go to school and they're going to be like, them cops back there, I seen them and they were talking and they were saying this and they were doing that. How do you control that with these? Because it's not them being bad kids. It's just them being kids. Kids gossip. Old people gossip. I gossip. How exactly do you plan to pay for these ideas, which don't sound bad, even if there's 4 kids, and knowing council, that's probably what will show up, and then you might get 4 in New Meadows also. And how are these deputies, how are we supposed to have the deputies do this when we don't even have enough deputies to be around. Like a lot of this time, these guys are one on, and that's it. And then everybody else has got to sit even on their days off. They're sitting by their radios because God forbid there be something bad happen, and then the whole town, everybody stops because you've never heard so many sirens, and we're all like, what's going on? How do you?
You touched on several items, so I'll try and make sure I get them all. The concern about costs to fund these types of programs. For an Explorer program or a cadet program, the cost is minimal, if anything at all. And if you have deputies, one of the good things about having a community like this where there's not the volume of calls for service, there's not the volume of people going to jail, things like that, the deputies have a lot of downtime of patrol, just being out and about. That's the times where they can be paired up potentially with one of these youngsters, young adults, and they're mentoring them. They're teaching them things. That also cuts down on some of the boredom and some of the downtime of, pushing a radio car by yourself and being out there for 12 hours, where you have somebody where you're training them and keeping them in tune with what's going on. Me personally, because of my feelings for these types of programs, having been from that program and operated or ran that program, and again, talking about costs, when I did that for my last 5 years before I retired, my department gave me zero money to run that program. Nothing at all. I had one deputy and I had to fight to get her, and it took me 2 years to get her. And I ran a program that was county-wide where I had somewhere around 500 kids, 20 patrol stations, 3 training academies, and not just the issues that you brought up, but in addition to that is making sure that there's appropriate conduct on both sides of that coin, from the deputy side and from the youth participant side. I used to be very well versed on that stuff, but I've been out of the mix for a minute. But when I retired, the industry standard for lawsuits for inappropriate activity between a deputy sheriff or a police officer and a youth participant program or youth program participant was $4.4 million. Because one officer, one station, small department, had inappropriate relations with a 16-year-old girl, and then from that, 2 other girls stepped up after that lawsuit was settled and said, hey, us too. So educating, teaching, selecting the right deputies to work with these kids, not just throwing them in a car and say go, but it takes training about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. It takes supervision. I came up with a training program for youth programs that I took all over the state of California. My department let me go all over the place. I taught it at Stanford University. I taught it at San Bernardino. I taught it in Riverside, Sacramento. I went all over the state. It was a program I put together on my own, an 8-hour class, teaching police officers, deputy sheriffs, and administrators at agencies, this is how you run a youth program. This is how you stay out of trouble. This is how you prevent lawsuits. This is how you prevent bad headlines, things like that, and still the kids get what they need to get out of the program. So that's an easy thing to do. I have backgrounds in how to do that, and again, it has to do with selecting the right people. And with only having a handful of kids, it's easier to manage that program. Okay, that's one part. Training, that's huge. I mean, training denied is, or training, there's no substitute for it. And yeah, training can be expensive. If all you do is send your people to post-certified classes in Meridian or Coeur d'Alene or wherever they're having them, it can be expensive. If you train in-house, you mitigate that because you're not paying any extra money. If you have, as I understand, deputies here work a 12-hour shift. On average, they may have, 2-3 calls a shift? That's a lot of time.
No, I think.
Well, it depends on the day. It depends on the day of the week and stuff like that. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of downtime in that 12-hour shift where you can use that opportunity to provide training. Whether it's anything from a small, let's sit down and do a chalk talk about how would we respond to the bank if the alarm popped off, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and just draw a diagram and just talk about things. That's training. If you're going out and setting up, okay, this is a traffic stop at nighttime, which is different from traffic stop during the daytime, because you have lighting issues and shadows and different things like that. Walking through that, which can take 15 minutes, it could take an hour potentially in a shift. I've done that with patrol deputies where I've worked. And it was slow, set up a scenario, call one car over at a time potentially, walk them through the scenario. We're monitoring the radio. If anything happens, we're running off. But if you have that opportunity to do that, you take that opportunity to do that. That's training, that's constant. Even when I was a military police officer, every shift on every day, no matter what the weather was or anything else, there were 2 training exercises on every shift, every single day. And it could be a small thing, a 15-minute type of a thing, or it could be a full-on 3-4 hour exercise where you're looking for somebody who's in a controlled area on the base and they're not supposed to be there. So there are opportunities, and that's always contingent upon calls for service, like everything else is, where you may have to put it down and run off. But it's still an opportunity to do those things without having to spend that much money. Me, I would, if necessary, pay for training out of my salary if I was the sheriff. If that was something that would help get those things done. Somebody mentioned earlier about they don't like to say I can't. I like to say that we can figure out a way to do this. Those are creative ways of coming up on training. It doesn't have to just be we send somebody off to Meridian for a couple days to get their training. There's online trainings. There's private organizations that are mostly retired, executives from law enforcement who have training. I know some of these individuals that have things. I know people that I can call, and if I have to pay for their flight to come down and put them up in my house and feed them while they're here, bring them in to provide training to the deputies here, I'd be willing to do that if that was necessary and would work. So it's not always a cost issue. Sometimes it is, but there are creative ways around that. Does that make sense? Did I answer?
It does. So you're willing to pay all this money out of pocket for all this stuff, and then what
Okay, time
happens?
out, because you had your one question. Now, I'm gonna take another question, Sheriff.
Can I
Okay.
answer on that as well? Mr. Roller's not wrong. I'm super excited. For $600, we just got a program. It's a 15-minute training scenario, exactly what he said. And it's awesome. We just demoed it. My patrol supervisor went through it. He said, this is legit. So what it does is, the example he used is exactly the scenario he used for the demo. It's a bank robbery at the bank. They use Google Maps to show us it's our bank, it's our location, everything's on there. And Dylan went through it, and then there's a bunch of questions he has to answer. They submit, and they go to the supervisor. The supervisor reviews the answers to the 15 questions, and they sit down and go over them together. Absolutely awesome program. $600 for a year for all my deputies to do it. It's only 15 minutes long. As far as the local in-house training, I have several retired law enforcement officers. They take care of our arrest techniques, our required trainings for arrest techniques. They come in and do it. They don't like doing it above the fire station because in July, it's a little hot up there, so they got a little fussy. I'm telling you guys right now, there's a retired female deputy that when we did our active shooter training in the courthouse with airsoft guns, they said she's the meanest woman they've ever seen and they don't want to be around her again because she shot the crap out of them. So we do these kinds of things. Just this last weekend, half of my staff last year went to a national training in New Meadows with fire and EMS on extracting injured people. The other half of my staff that didn't go last year, they were there for the last 2 days going through that training. Super training. They learn how to put tourniquets on. They learn how to pack wounds. They learn how to pack people out of an environment. Unfortunately, again, we all are frustrated with our federal government. When I went through it last year, you had guns with blanks, and so you had real bang, bang, bang. It was intense, lights flashing, music playing, all kinds of different scenarios. Well, the federal government said that that's unsafe to have blanks, and so now they have little wooden guns and they have to say bang, bang. Ridiculous, but our folks are getting these trainings, they're getting this stuff, and it's not costing us a lot. So he's not wrong. We have these things, we're doing these things. I'm super excited about this new program because it is going to be exactly what we need. It's a 15-minute scenario. They can do the program, they send it to their supervisor, and they're done. I get daily emails or weekly emails. It's a company similar to, for those of you who in law enforcement, you're familiar with Lexipol. It's a big policy program. This is similar to it, but they send us all sorts of legal updates and all sorts of stuff. I send it out to my guys and say, hey, by the end of the week, I want to hear your response to this. Email me back, tell me what you guys would do in this situation or what you think about this. So we're doing that kind of stuff. It's really exciting, it's cool, and it's not difficult to do.
Okay, 2 more. Push it. So 1 and then 2. And then we're going to make a change.
So my question is, as it was already touched on, there's a difference between big cities, even Ada. I mean, even Weezer's bigger than we are. Heaven forbid. So my question is, have you ever worked in a smaller agency where it is small, not so much slower pace, because for a call for service in a larger area, maybe shots fired or a person down. Here we have cows and we have rocks. Those are also considered calls for service, and those aren't just here and there. So our officers also respond for medical. We have a plethora of all of these other types of calls for service where a larger agency doesn't. Have you ever had that experience to work in a small rural area where we have the open range and we have cows and we have rocks and we're just not flat, and know what it's like to have that slower time frame? Our guys aren't just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. They are out there, and they're also actively checking buildings. What experience do you have in that smaller area and overseeing these smaller departments to be able to understand what goes on in the smaller agency instead of the large agency?
I worked for a small police department early in my career, which was a town called Signal Hill. It was 2.4 square miles, right in the middle of a bigger city, but they were incorporated as their own city. It was fairly rural at the time. It's blown up like crazy now with condos and everything else. But back then it was oil wells. I don't think they had any farming or anything like that I can remember, but basically just residential and open area, you know. So we didn't have issues with cows and stuff like that. But being here, you know, for the last 5 years, I've seen it. I've stopped and, you know, helped a guy push a rock out of the middle of the highway that, you know, it was pretty heavy and he couldn't get it out of there. It just fell off the roadside just a couple months ago. And so I understand those types of things, and those are issues. Where I've worked before, I worked for a team called the Crime Impact Teams, where I had a countywide team with 8 deputies, and we went all over Los Angeles County. In Los Angeles County, when you think LA County, you think LA, downtown LA, high-rise buildings. You get to the north end of the county, it's all rural. I mean, it's horse property, it's desert. There's, you know, rolling from Lancaster Station out to an area called Lake LA, which is an unincorporated area, small community, probably no more than a couple thousand people living there. Rolling hard, it's a 45-minute roll with the licensed siren on. It's very out of the way. And being out there and patrolling those areas where there was no radio signal whatsoever, the computers in the car didn't work, the radio didn't work, your cell phone didn't get a signal, and you're still out there and you got, you know, people that you're stopping or detaining that are, you know, possibly selling drugs at a park or something like that. Police work is police work. It comes down to more so a volume than type of calls. Yeah, I've been to a lot of calls that were gang related and things like that. I worked at gang team for 8 years, blah, blah, blah. And they don't have them here, thank goodness. That's why we're here, that's why I came here. But it's also responsibility of law enforcement in those communities to make sure it stays that way. When I first came up here and watching the TV news, it was kind of like the weather 6 times in 30 minutes. There wasn't much going on. It's community things. If it was football season, a little bit about the Broncos playing, something like that. Now it's shootings, gang-related stuff, just south of us, and home invasion robberies, pursuits. Just had a deputy got killed walking up on a traffic stop a couple of weeks back. It can happen. I had some nut going through New Meadows, stops and ends up doing what he did up there. I never thought in 100 years that would ever happen here, right? But it happened here. It can happen here. It's possible to happen here. So I think a benefit from it's probably easier to learn policing in a rural environment than going the other direction, because you can always power down and you have that extra experience where you can provide training, you can have your antennae up. This area of the state, we have so much transient traffic, as everybody knows, because we got the main thoroughfare going all the way to the north end of the state, right? The 2 people the guy that shot the corrections officers and helped escape the other guy from St. Al's in Boise, they went right past my house on 95, right? They're here. If you've never stopped a guy like that or guys like that, career criminals, prison gangsters, whole different breed of individual, whole different. The way they present themselves, their body language, the way they talk, the words they choose. You can literally see them sizing you up to see if they can take you or not. And I've interviewed dozens of these guys, bad guys. And I think it's easier to have that in the back of your head. Make regular traffic stops all the time, regular folks, not paying attention, went a couple miles over, not a big deal, take it easy, slow down, whatever. But then when you come across something like that, to be able to start having the hairs in your back of your neck stand up because you've seen that before, you've dealt with that before, and now they're here. That's a benefit, I think. And to have that experience and be able to train some of your deputies who haven't seen that before, because it doesn't exist here for the most part, that's a benefit as well, I think.
My question to both of you, you're talking about this training with kids. What about the legal liability? What do you do about seeing that they're protected and you're talking about going in on a bank robbery or something like that? You got kids involved doing that? What do you do then?
Well, for these programs, they're set up that the kids they're not cops. They're not going to be put in situations that are dangerous.
If they're in the car and going in the bank, then they're...
Well, that's simulated.
Huh?
That's a simulator.
That training simulated.
What if it's real?
If it's real, the kid stays in the car. You may even have to drop the kid off a block before you get there so they're in a safe area. Different places have different policies. I've worked with
big liability there.
Well, everything you do in law enforcement is liability. And all you can do is mitigate it or limit it to the extent possible if you're going to have anything new what you're doing. Every time you bring somebody to jail, there's civil liability. Every time you stop somebody, there's civil liability.
I understand.
Yeah, you know that. So bringing a youth program in, it has to first be managed properly. Everybody has to be trained up on what they can and cannot do. The kids need to be trained up on what their expectations are, what they can and cannot do. Because like somebody said a little while ago, young people talk, they gossip, stuff like that. Well, they also do things that are kind of counterproductive and against what the program goals are as well. So you have to manage that.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to just do a Okay, so some of our guys here have come from a distance. I'm going to take one more question, okay, for our reps, and then I'm actually going to release you guys. Okay, so there it is, make it good.
Save the best for last.
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
So my question is for Mr. Shepard. Idaho is the #1 state for adolescent suicide. And there was a House Bill 684 that got pushed up that would have brought counseling to the rural schools. And I noticed that you voted no to that bill. And I was just wondering what I would like to understand your reasoning for that, and then also, what would the candidates do to help bring awareness to the adolescent suicide in Idaho, and how we can combat that?
So forgive me if I don't remember the exact details of the bill, but again, two things that will play into my reluctance to vote for such. One, what were the federal strings attached that came along with the funding for that? And the one bill that I remember something in that, it was actually counseling coming from counselors from out of state, like online counseling or telecounseling. I'm a little nervous about having counselors from California or Oregon and Washington counsel anybody in the state of Idaho on what they consider to be proper conduct. And when you allow, I'll just come out and say it, when you allow the possible woke movement from those states to come into our state through counseling, you've set yourself up to have the same problems they're having over there. And I would rather our counselors here in this state, funded by state money, bring that awareness to, and not to take, demean that there is a definite concern there, but it's how it's being done that I was against. So.
Thank you.
Sure. As I mentioned before, my wife and I ran a couple of children's ministries through the church that were designed to help families avoid getting entanglement with the government. And one of the things you're going to maybe come to not like about me is I sound like a broken record. Okay. The fact of the matter is I know that communities, especially if we find a way, I don't know how this doesn't sound bad, but to incentivize our faith community to step forward. Okay, this matter of adolescent suicide is I don't know if there is a more serious issue. I haven't talked to somebody under 25 years old, and I'd ask them a question like, "What do you see yourself doing in 10 years?" I mean, the problem, what you're asking about is, I don't want to call it a symptom because that doesn't give it enough gravity, but it's the end result of having our kids lose hope. It's the end result of having our kids feel unsupported. It's the end result of our kids feeling like they don't have a part to play in our communities. Okay, so now we're back to what I've said before. That involves all of us. That involves Explorer programs, which is where I got started in law enforcement. That involves whatever we can do to treat kids as individuals without, as my challenger says, without getting influences here that don't belong here. Okay, that's my answer, is find a way for government to be involved at the absolute minimum level, hopefully not growing it any bigger than it is by creating another agency, and find a way to empower communities, maybe through philanthropic means, I don't know, but find a way to bring communities together and to make it happen. We can do it, we absolutely can. And I refuse to think it's a government problem as much as I think it's a community problem.
Right. And I brought up the question just because there's no counselors in our schools out here, so thank you guys.
Yeah.
I got to speak to that because I'm on the Southwest District Health Board, and as far as I'm concerned, our state is one of the worst in the way we handled that. Kids had no hope. We had parents come into our meetings saying, please end this lockdown, please. And we did in our county. We passed resolutions. I did all kinds of stuff. I fought with the health district every single month and constantly trying to get them to stop doing what they were doing. But it was all about the money. Those health districts made so damn much money that they pushed all those policies. They pushed the masks in the school, which was terrible for our kids. It was terrible for everybody because they got money for it. The schools got money for it. The health districts got money for it. They pushed the social distancing. They pushed all of that stuff. They pushed them to keep the schools closed. Our health districts did that because they got money for it. It was all about the money and growing their agency. They didn't give a damn about our kids. That is why I'm very anti-health district, and we don't need them. We can do the stuff in our county. I will tell you, we got some opioid money, and we did our county, and we trained a gal at you have to be qualified, but in trauma training. right here at our clinic. That's another problem I have with health districts. They're busy taking millions of federal dollars to put an agenda in place, a federal agenda, so that they can compete against our little clinic up here and the private industry so they can have socialized medicine, which we have that in Idaho. Unfortunately, it's a disaster. But anyhow, we trained a gal there, and a couple of gals came and addressed us at our commissioners meeting a couple weeks ago and said that it was working out great. It was a trauma training, and it's incredible. So when we still have about $9,000 or $10,000 to do that with, so the more people, if they're qualified and they live in this county and they can help our kids out and our veterans and people that just have a trauma in their life they need some help with, we have money to train them. So that was pretty exciting when we got that figured out.
This is definitely an issue. I'm glad you brought it up. How I look at this is, for over 100 years, we've taken God out of our country. And we're a country that was founded in the principles of God, from our Declaration of Independence to our Constitution. I've heard the word hope used. Well, it's three things. It's faith, hope, and love. And I can tell you right now, the government doesn't know how to love. All right? It doesn't know how to give you faith, and it's definitely stealing your hope. And that's what's been taken away from our kids, and that's why we're seeing this. Mr. Dunn made a good point. We need faith-based counselors more than anything for these young people so that they can get their belief back, that there is something bigger than them, that they have a purpose in life. And there's a lot of faith-based counselors out there who probably would be willing to volunteer. I want to hit on Vicky's point, too, about these public health districts. Idaho County, when I was a county commissioner, we wrote a check every year. I want to say it's close to $34,000 now. When I was a commissioner, it was about $27,000. How about we keep that money in our community to help our kids and pay counselors and bring them in? But the key, I'm going to be honest with you, to your point, Charlie, you don't want these woke people coming in paid for by the federal government. These kids need real help, and it's a real concern. And along the way, there's probably some parents that need some help too. And it all needs to be involved with that. And as a community, that's what we need to do. That's how I see the solution. When you take God out of everything, something's going to fill it. And I'm sorry, guys, but evil is filled. It's plain and simple. That's how I see it today. No way around it. All right? We got to get back to that. And even with God, it's not perfect. God doesn't solve our problems, but He does give us faith and the opportunity and our abilities to go solve those problems. That's what it's about for me.
Hey, I'm just so impressed by all of your questions. You guys are awesome. Doing a good job. Okay, our representative stand. And get out. No. Thank you guys. So I know that as they're going, if anybody needs to talk to them individually, yeah, go do that outside. We are going to go with this a few more minutes.
I have a
You got the keys.
Are you sick?
Now I just gotta hope it's spelled right on here.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm rolling.